Rain had a way of making the small town of Willowbend feel like something out of a storybook. The cobblestone streets glistened beneath silver clouds, and the scent of wet roses drifted through the air as people ducked beneath awnings or hurried into cozy cafes. But for Ivy Caldwell, rain wasn't something to avoid. It was something to listen to, something that gave her permission to slow down. She stood at the corner of Maple and Rosemont, a tattered umbrella in one hand, a worn leather-bound notebook in the other. She had always loved this part of town, this old bookstore with ivy creeping up its bricks, the flower shop with its always open windows, and especially marigolds, a quiet little cafe where the coffee came in mismatched mugs, and the muffins tasted like home. That morning, Ivy wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be 2 towns over at a community art fair showcasing her watercolor series. But her car, faithfully unreliable, had other plans. A sputtering engine, a smoking hood, and an apologetic tow truck driver had left her stranded. Now, she found herself tucked in the corner booth of marigolds, watching the world through rain-streaked glass, sketching passers-by with soft pencil strokes while nursing a lukewarm chai latte. She didn't know her life was about to change, and she certainly didn't expect it to walk through the cafe door with a dripping coat and a smile that made time. Slow. Noah Bennett had a talent for finding beauty in the mundane. As a documentary filmmaker, he'd traveled through countless cities, captured stories of resilience and change, and worn through more camera straps than he could count. But after his father's passing, something in him had shifted. Suddenly, stories about strangers didn't feel as grounding anymore. So he returned to Willowbend, the town he hadn't lived in since he was 17, seeking something, anything that felt like belonging again. What he didn't expect was to find it in a booth by the window. He ordered black coffee and a cinnamon roll and scanned the room for a seat, every table taken except one with a single woman sketching in silence, her brows furrowed in concentration. She looked peaceful, like the world existed differently around her. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, pointing to the seat across from her. Ivy looked up, startled out of her sketching world. She blinked, taking in the tall man with soaked hair, tired eyes, and a warmth in his voice that made her shoulders ease. Sure," she said, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "It's yours." He sat down, offering a quick, grateful smile. "Thanks. Didn't expect a crowd this early." "They all hide when it rains," Ivy said, gesturing outside. "Except for us." "I guess we're the strange ones," he replied. She smiled. "I like the rain. So do I." A pause. Gentle, curious. "I'm Noah, by the way." "Ivy. Like the plant?" She nodded. "Exactly like the plant. Grows everywhere, hard to kill." He laughed, a full, genuine sound that surprised even him. "Strong name. And you?" she asked. "Are you always this charming with strangers in coffee shops?" "No," he said, chuckling. "Just the ones sketching storms." Ivy raised a brow. "You were watching me draw. You were the only calm thing in the room." It stood out. Her heart did a little somersault, small but unmistakable. They talked for nearly an hour. About where they'd grown up. About how Ivy turned feelings into colors. How Noah used film to capture people's truths. About why they both ended up in a small town like Willowbend. The conversation was easy, too easy. Like flipping through pages of a book they hadn't realized they were both already in. Eventually, Noah glanced at his watch and sighed. "I was supposed to be shooting a local artist profile today." "Let me guess," Ivy said, smirking. "Rain? Rain?" Apparently, every artist in town was scheduled. She looked down at her sketchbook and held it up. "Well, I paint, if that counts." He leaned forward, surprised. "Seriously? I was actually supposed to be at an art fair today. My car had other plans." Noah smiled, eyes glinting. "What are the odds?" Apparently pretty good, she said, then added shyly, "You can see my studio sometime." "If you're looking for a subject," his expression softened. "I really like that." For a moment, the cafe faded into quiet hums and drifting jazz. The rain tapped gently on the windows like a whisper, and the space between them, once awkward now, felt charged with something new. Something warm, something beginning. By the time they left Marigold's, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Noah held the door open as Ivy stepped out, her sketchbook clutched tightly to her chest. She turned to him, her smile easy, her eyes bright. "Thanks for the company," she said. "Thanks for letting me crash your quiet," he replied. They parted with a promise unspoken, but understood. And neither of them knew that one small rainstorm, one broken car, and one crowded cafe had just rewritten the rest of their lives. Willow Bend was the kind of town where everyone knew your dog's name, and strangers became neighbors with a borrowed cup of sugar. Life moved a little slower here, seasons painted every street corner, and time felt like it breathed with gentler lungs. Ivy Caldwell had grown up in this quiet rhythm, yet she'd always walked a little differently through it, head full of colors, heart full of stories she never quite said aloud. Her studio sat above her grandmother's flower shop, tucked between an old watch repair store and a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. Ivy called it the nest because it was her safe place. A space cluttered with paintbrushes and mismatched jars, canvases leaning against every wall, twinkling fairy lights wrapped around wooden beams, and the ever-present hum of soft indie music playing in the background. Every morning, Ivy would rise early, open the window to let in the smell of roses and bread, and spend her first hour painting the way she felt, not what she saw. Some days, that meant a swirl of moody blues. Other days, warm golds laced with soft pink. Her art was her language. It was how she processed everything: joy, fear, love, and loneliness, because no matter how beautiful her world looked, Ivy often felt just a step out of sync with it. Had friends, sure, clients who adored her work, children who asked for Miss Ivy's magical paintings. But when the door clicked shut at night, when the world turned quiet and the last brush was cleaned, she sometimes found herself wondering if anyone truly saw her. Not her art, not her smile. Noah, meanwhile, was learning how to breathe again. In his father's old house, it sat at the edge of town, near the lake, where cattails swayed and ducks gathered every evening like clockwork. He hadn't stepped inside in nearly 10 years, not since his father's health declined and he'd kept distance instead of comfort. The guilt of those missing years weighed heavier than any of the camera gear he'd ever hauled across continents. Now, back in Willow Bend, the house felt like a memory and a mystery all at once. Dusty photo albums lined the hallway shelves. The old grandfather clock still ticked too loudly, and the fireplace mantel held the wooden boat Noah had carved as a boy. Never finished. He'd taken a break from documentary work after his father's funeral. What was meant to be a short return home had turned into weeks, then months. Something about the stillness held him, but stillness wasn't always peaceful. Some nights, Noah found himself pacing the floors at 2 a.m., unsure whether he missed the rush of his career or feared what it meant to let go of it. There was a part of him deep, buried longing to build something rooted, something lasting. But he'd lived so long chasing stories in motion, he wasn't sure how to write one. That stayed. That's what surprised him most about Ivy. She was still, but not stagnant. Her presence felt like standing in a room filled with sunlight, warm, quiet, and alive with a kind of magic you couldn't explain. They didn't plan to see each other again so soon, but Willow Bend, being what it was, had its own way of pushing fate along. Noah had stopped by Marigold's the following Saturday to edit some old footage and nurse a cup of bitter coffee. When Ivy walked in with paint on her hands and a lavender muffin in her bag, she spotted him instantly and hesitated. for just a second before heading toward him with a shy smile. You always sit in the same spot, she teased. Only when I'm hoping lightning strikes twice? She blushed, laughing. You always say things like, that? Only when I mean them? That afternoon turned into evening. They walked through Willowbend's artisan market, visited the bookstore where Ivy's art prints were on display, and ended up sitting on a bench near the lake, talking, asking, listening. They learned the little things first: how Ivy never painted the same flower twice, how Noah always carried a backup battery but forgot lunch, how she was terrified of flying, how he was scared of staying in one place too long. And then the bigger things, how Ivy's parents had moved away when she was 10, leaving her in her grandmother's care, a decision she never quite forgave them for. How Noah's father had raised him alone, and how he still didn't know if the man had ever been proud of him. They were both gentle with each other's truths, neither tried to fix, only to understand. And somehow that was more healing than either of them expected. In the days that followed, Ivy invited Noah to her studio. He showed up with 2 cameras, a quiet reverence, and no idea what to expect. He was stunned. The walls were alive with emotion sunsets you could almost taste, portraits that felt like memories, and dreamscapes that made him ache in places he didn't know had names. You paint what people feel, he said softly, stepping closer to a piece that looked like a sunrise melting into the ocean. I try to, she whispered. Some people sing it, I paint it. He turned to her. Do you ever paint how you feel? She hesitated, then pointed to a half-finished canvas, soft tones of lavender, pale blue, and a single figure standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the sky open. That one's me, she said quietly. Learning how to trust the jump. He didn't ask what she meant. He just memorized the color of her eyes when she said it. That evening, Ivy walked him out onto the fire escape. They sat with their feet hanging over the edge, drinking ginger tea and watching the town glow beneath them. It was silent for a while. Then she asked, do you think some people are meant to just pass through each other's lives? Noah looked at her, the steam from his cup rising like a breath between them. I used to, he said, but now I'm starting to think some people show up just when you're finally ready to stop running. She looked at him. And for the first time in a long while, she believed it might be true. There was something about slow beginnings that made every moment feel like it mattered more. For Ivy and Noah, the days that followed weren't drenched in grand confessions or sweeping declarations. Instead, they were filled with quiet invitations, little, seemingly ordinary moments that slowly stitched their hearts closer together. It started with Saturday mornings. Noah began stopping by the nest with coffee in hand, one black, one out. Chai. At first, he claimed it was coincidence, but Ivy knew better. Eventually, she started setting the stool by the window for him, her paints already laid out, her playlist set to the mellow jazz he once said he liked. Some days, he filmed her working. Not in a staged way, just real, raw, silent. The soft drag of a brush, the way her fingers smeared color into emotion. The furrow in her brow when she got lost in a canvas. He told her once, you make stillness look alive. And Ivy, cheeks pink, replied, you make chaos look like purpose. They were opposite currents drawn to the same ocean. Their connection deepened on the day of the Willowbend Autumn Festival. The entire town had transformed into a painter's dream. Golden leaves carpeting the streets, pumpkin carts, cinnamon stands, and twinkling string lights stretching across the main square like stars waiting to fall. Ivy had a booth that day, showcasing her newest series, Things We Don't Say Out Loud, abstract pieces mostly. Whispers of feelings turned into shapes and colors. Noah stopped by just before sunset, camera slung over his shoulder, sweater sleeves pushed up, a soft grin playing on his face. I've seen a lot of beautiful things in my travels, he said, studying one of her paintings, a swirl of amber and indigo shaped like two people missing each other. But nothing ever made me feel the way your work does. Ivy turned to him, heart suddenly too full. You always say things like that? No, he said softly, just when I mean it. Their hands brushed as he passed her a cup of hot apple cider. Neither pulled away. Later that night, they sat on the grass near the lake, just beyond the festival's glow. A folk band played in the distance. Lanterns drifted into the sky, one by one, each carrying someone's whispered wish. Make one, Ivy said, holding out a lantern to Noah. He hesitated, then took it. I don't really do wishes. Try, she whispered. He stared at the flame, the small paper balloon swelling with light. I wish ... he began, voice rough with hesitation. I wish I knew how to stay. Ivy didn't speak. She just reached over, threading her pinky with his dot. It was the first time they touched with intention, the kind that didn't ask for anything, just quietly said, I'm here. The days blurred into a rhythm. Evenings spent watching old movies in Ivy's studio, knees almost brushing on the couch. Afternoons at the farmer's market, arguing over which pie was better, apple or pecan. Ivy let him win, but only because he smiled like victory was the sweetest thing he'd ever tasted. One night, after a quiet dinner and a walk through the candlelit part of town, they ended up back at Noah's porch. The moon was full, the kind that made everything glow with a silver hush. He looked at her for a long time, and then, gently, like asking permission, he tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear. Ivy, he murmured. Her name had never sounded. So safe, so sacred. But instead of a kiss, she smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Her way of saying, not yet, but almost. Noah didn't mind waiting. He already knew she was worth it. What neither of them admitted out loud, at least not yet, was how the silence between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was expectant, like the pause before a song starts, or the breath you hold before a first kiss. Ivy began painting late into the night, unable to stop the flood of inspiration Noah stirred in her. Her canvases softened, warmed. She stopped painting lonely figures and started creating scenes of connection, of hands reaching, of glances held a second too long, of hearts almost touching. Noah, too, began documenting life in Willowbend like he was afraid to forget any of it, not just through film, but in his journal. He wrote about the way Ivy sipped her tea with both hands, about how she hummed when she mixed colors, about how her laugh made his chest ache with something that felt like home. He didn't call it love yet, but his heart already knew. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled in unexpectedly. Ivy was in the studio, candles flickering, rain tapping on the windows like music. Noah showed up, soaked and breathless, holding a bag of her favorite lemon cookies from the bakery. Thought you might want company, he said, shaking rain from his hair. I always do, she whispered, smiling. They sat cross-legged on the floor, sharing cookies, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like lavender and pine. Outside, lightning danced. Inside, something even more electric pulsed between them. I used to think I wasn't made for stillness, he said suddenly, voice low. Ivy turned to him. What changed? You, he said, eyes not leaving hers. You made staying feel like something sacred, like maybe that's what I've been chasing all this time. Her breath hitched, and for a second she almost leaned in, but instead she whispered, I'm scared, Noah. He reached for her hand. Me too. Their fingers laced together. And in the heart of that storm, with thunder rumbling like truth and their hearts beating like questions waiting to be answered, they sat in the quiet power of a love not yet spoken but fully blooming. The romantic tension between them became a thread through every shared glance, Every accidental brush of arms, every unspoken "I wish I could kiss you right now" moment. They never rushed it, that the world around them knew. Maybe deep down, they did too. That something rare was unfolding, and that forever wasn't just a word anymore. It was becoming a possibility, a heartbeat, a home. In each other. By the time the first snowfall blanketed Willow Bend in white, Ivy and Noah had become something neither of them dared to define, but everyone else could see. Not quite lovers, not just friends, more like two souls carefully learning the rhythm of each other's hearts. And maybe that's what made it even more beautiful. They weren't rushing to love, they were becoming it. It was during one of those slow December mornings, frost glinting on window panes, cinnamon in the air, when Ivy first realized how deeply she'd let Noah into her world. He was standing in her kitchen in mismatched socks, humming a tune as he whisked pancake batter like it was a sacred task. Her studio smelled like nutmeg and warm syrup. The light caught in his hair just right, making him look golden, like a painting she hadn't realized she'd been trying to create her whole life. She didn't say anything, she just watched him, memorizing the moment. And in that quiet, something in her whispered, "This is what love could look like." They started sharing pieces of their past like love letters folded open. Ivy told him about the time she got lost in the woods behind her grandmother's house at age 9 and cried until the sun came up, only to be found asleep beneath a willow tree, dreaming of wings. "That's when I knew I was meant to create beauty," she said, "to turn fear into something soft." Noah shared how his mother had left when he was 5, how his father had tried his best, but grief made some men silent, and how Noah had spent years looking at the world through a lens because it was safer than looking into someone's eyes. "I never learned how to be still with people," he confessed, "until now." They were two people who'd known abandonment in different forms, but chose not to let it define them. Instead, they built something out of it, not walls, but a bridge. Their first real date wasn't even supposed to be a date. Ivy invited him to the winter solstice bonfire by the lake. He brought a thermos of spiced tea and a blanket that smelled faintly of pine. They found a quiet spot away from the crowd, watching sparks drift into the velvet sky. "I feel like I've known you longer than I have," Ivy whispered, clutching the edges of the blanket tighter. Noah looked at her, firelight flickering across his features. "Maybe we knew each other in some other life." She laughed gently. "You believe in that?" "I didn't," he said. "But now, I think I believe in anything that leads me to you." She turned her face toward his. And for the first time, he kissed her. It wasn't hurried or hungry. It was slow, gentle, like discovering a secret that had been waiting to be known. And Ivy felt it all the way to her soul. From that moment on, things shifted. Noah would leave notes for her in the paint jars. "You make color look like poetry." Ivy started sketching him when he wasn't looking. Soft portraits that captured the quiet way he smiled when he thought no one noticed. They danced barefoot in her studio to old records, went ice skating on the frozen pond, and laughed until they fell. Shared childhood stories while baking pies that always came out too soft or too burnt, but never short on sweetness. On New Year's Eve, they sat on the rooftop of Noah's house, wrapped in layers of blankets, watching the fireworks shimmer over the lake. "If you could wish for anything," he asked, "what would it be?" She didn't look away from the sky. "For this to last," she said. "For you to stay?" He didn't answer right away, but when he reached for her hand, his grip was firm, like a promise. They began dreaming together, small dreams like opening a joint gallery cafe, bigger dreams like traveling to Iceland to paint and film the northern lights, and the ones in between like Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and music and silence that felt like home. Noah told her she was the reason he no longer feared standing still. Ivy told him he was the only person who'd ever seen her without needing to fix her, They both knew what they had was rare, and they both were starting to believe it could be forever. But even in love, fear has a way of whispering. One night, while looking through old family albums in Noah's attic, Ivy found a letter tucked between the pages, sealed, addressed to Noah. He hadn't read it. "It's from your mom," she said softly. He stared at it like it burned. "I found it a year ago," he murmured. "Couldn't open it?" Ivy held it out to him. "You don't have to, but maybe you can." He took it with trembling hands. That night, he read it quietly, alone. And the next day, he told Ivy something he never thought he would. "She left because she was scared," he said, "but she loved me. She said she loved me every single day. She just didn't know how to stay." Ivy reached for him, tears in her eyes. "She wasn't you," she whispered. "And you're not her." Noah leaned into her touch, and in that moment, something inside him healed, because someone believed in him, not in spite of his scars, but because of them. That winter passed like a dream, filled with brushstrokes and lens flares, snow angels and midnight whispers. They weren't perfect. They didn't need to be. They had trust. They had laughter. They had each other. And as the first signs of spring peeked through the snow, Ivy stood at the window of her studio, watching Noah dance with her dog in the garden below, and whispered to herself, "So this is what love looks like when it's real, when it's gentle. When it's forever." Spring arrived like a whispered promise, brushing color back into the world. In Willow Bend, cherry blossoms bloomed along Main Street. The air held the scent of fresh beginnings, and the lake thawed into shimmering silver under soft morning sun. But for Ivy and Noah, the warmth of the season was met with an unexpected chill in their hearts. It began with a phone call. Noah had left his phone on the studio windowsill while filming Ivy's sketch. When it rang, they both glanced at the screen. The caller ID read, "Marla, Portland Arts Collective." Noah's expression changed in an instant. Not fear, more like something between guilt and uncertainty. He silenced the call. "You can answer," Ivy said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's just work," he replied, but she noticed the way his fidgeted. "Portland?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I sent in a proposal months ago. Didn't think they'd respond." She hesitated. "Is it important?" "It's a residency, 6 months, full funding. A chance to work with a team documenting art in underserved communities." Her heart fluttered, part pride, part fear. "That's incredible," she whispered. "You should do it." But her eyes betrayed her. And Noah saw it. "I haven't said yes," he said quickly. "I haven't even thought it through." But that wasn't true. He had thought it through. More than once. He just hadn't pictured going alone. In the following days, the air between them shifted. They still laughed, still kissed, still shared tea and late-night dreams. But somewhere underneath it all, unspoken questions began to build. Would he go? Would she ask him to stay? Should love ever stand in the way of purpose? One afternoon, Ivy found herself standing in her studio, holding one of her older paintings, a piece she'd made before Noah. It was a swirl of reds and blacks and sharp edges. Back then, it had felt honest. Now, it felt like a wound she had already healed from, but the fear was creeping back in. What if Noah left? What if she wasn't enough reason to stay? What if the people you loved always left, just like everyone else? One night, she voiced it. They were on the rooftop again. Stars bright, wind soft. "If you go," she whispered, "would you come back?" Noah turned to her, startled. "Of course I would." She looked down. "How can you be sure?" He paused. "Because you're the first thing that's made me feel like staying isn't giving up." Her eyes filled. "But what if I can't go with you? What if I'm not meant for the kind of life you want?" He took her hands, gripped them tightly. that I change the life I want. But that's not fair to you. It's not fair to pretend this doesn't matter more. Silence. Then she whispered, I don't want to be the reason you regret anything. And I don't want to resent you for not asking me to stay. It was the first time their love felt heavy. Too many what ifs. Too much fear of loss days. Past. Noah tried to focus on the present, but Portland called again. This time with an offer letter. He didn't tell Ivy right away. He didn't want to break what they hadn't even figured out how to name Ivy. Meanwhile, painted like she was, trying to hold on to something slipping through her fingers. Her new series became quieter figures leaning away, shadows stretching between silhouettes, colors blurred like unshed tears. One evening, she stood in front of the canvas she had begun the night after their first kiss. It was nearly finished. Now, two people standing beneath a tree hands, almost touching. Almost. But not quite. They argued for the first time on a Tuesday. It was stupid. About something small. Dishes or dinner or forgotten plans. But it wasn't about that at all. Just don't understand why you won't tell me what you want, Ivy cried. Because I don't know. Noah snapped. Because every time I think about leaving, I feel like I'm betraying something that finally feels right, and every time I think about staying, I wonder if I'm throwing away everything I've worked for. I didn't ask you to choose between me and your dreams. You didn't have to, he said bitterly. You just stand there, making me feel like if I choose anything else, I'm choosing against you. Her face crumpled. I've never asked anyone to stay, she whispered, because no one ever has. And just like that, the truth spilled between them. Raw, honest, painful. He came to her studio the next day. She wasn't there, but she'd left. Something on the easel. It was the finished painting. The two figures now stood hand in hand, and at the bottom, in small, trembling script, she had written, "Forever was just a word. Until you." Noah sat in front of it for a long, long time then. He packed a bag and left for Portland. They didn't speak for 3 weeks. Spring melted into summer. The town bloomed, but Ivy felt cold. She told herself she was fine, that people leave, that she was used to it, but she wasn't. Not when it was him. Noah tried to throw himself into the work. The project was exciting. The city alive, the opportunities real, but everything felt hollow. Every story he captured made him miss the one he left behind. Every sunset he filmed reminded him of the firelight in Ivy's studio. Every crowd made him long for the quiet of her heartbeat beside him. He was where he always thought he wanted to be, and yet he had never felt so lost. It rained the night Ivy broke. She didn't plan it. Grief rarely respects schedules. She had walked into the nest to prepare for her first solo gallery show, something she should have been celebrating. The town had rallied around her. The local paper had even done a spread on her artwork. The studio was brimming with fresh canvases, fairy lights twinkling, and the scent of lavender and varnish in the air, but none of it felt real, because one person wasn't there to see it. Noah. She stood in the middle of her studio, surrounded by the story of their love captured in brushstrokes and color, and suddenly she couldn't breathe. She slid to the floor, back against the wall, heart trembling in her chest, and whispered through tears, "Why couldn't you stay?" The paintings didn't answer, but her tears did. They spoke of longing, of a love that asked for nothing but presence, of a heart that had finally let someone all the way in and had to watch him walk away, miles away. Noah stared at a glowing screen in a Portland loft that didn't feel like home. The edited documentary he'd been working on was done. Voices of resilience, images of beauty, music threaded like a heartbeat. It was good. Everyone said so. But when he watched it, all he could think was, Ivy should be here. She'd know what it meant better than anyone. She'd know that art wasn't about acclaim. It was about connection. She'd understand that sometimes Staying was the most courageous story of all. He closed his laptop. Then he pulled out a small painting Ivy had once slipped into his travel bag. A soft blend of sky and sea, with two tiny figures on the horizon, one looking back, one standing still. Noah stared at it for a long time. Then finally he whispered, "What am I doing?" It took him 2 days to drive back to Willow Bend. 2 days of rehearsed apologies and rewritten confessions. 2 days of hoping he hadn't waited too long. 2 days of praying that some things were strong enough to bend and not break. He arrived the night of Ivy's gallery opening. The whole town had come out. The walls of the community center glowed with her heart on full display paintings of longing, joy, healing, and one central canvas that caught everyone's breath. It was titled, "The One Who Taught Me Forever." And standing at the center were two silhouettes, no faces, just colors intertwined, amber, indigo, gold. Noah stepped into the room just as she turned to address the crowd. She wore a soft green dress, her hair tucked back loosely, eyes bright despite the ache she tried to hide. Her voice was steady, even as it cracked slightly near the end. "Art has always been how I say the things I'm too afraid to speak," she said, "and this collection is about someone who reminded me that love is not a weakness. That opening your heart, even if it breaks, is the bravest thing you can do." Noah swallowed the lump in his throat. She still spoke like she loved him, still painted like she believed in the us they could have been. He stepped forward. People turned. She looked up, and her breath hitched. He was the last person she expected to see, but the only one she wanted to. He walked slowly, nervously, like a man unsure if he had any right to be standing in the place he once called home. When he reached her, the room faded. It was just them again. Ivy and Noah, a brush, and a lens, 2 artists, 2 hearts. One story still unfinished. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I thought leaving was brave. I thought chasing something bigger made me whole." He looked around at the paintings, then back to her. "But I was already whole. With you." She stared at him, tears welling. "You left," she whispered. "I know," he said. "And every mile away from you felt like a mistake I couldn't undo fast enough." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. It was worn, creased at the corners. "I wrote this on the second night in Portland. I never sent it because I was scared you wouldn't care anymore." She took it. Her hand shook. "I care," she said. "I never stopped." His eyes searched hers. "Can we try again?" She didn't answer right away, but then she stepped forward and took his hand. Room erupted into applause, but they didn't hear it. They only heard the sound of 2 hearts finding their rhythm again. Later that night, on the rooftop of her studio, just like old times, they sat wrapped in a blanket, the town glowing beneath them. "You really came back," she whispered, head resting against his shoulder. "I never want to leave again," he said. "Unless you're with me." She turned to him, smile trembling. "I'm scared." He cupped her face gently. "So am I, but love without fear isn't real love. It's just a dream. And I don't want to dream anymore. I want this." She leaned in, and this time, when they kissed, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't new. It was a homecoming, the beginning of forever. And this time, they both believed in it. Willow Bend awoke to the sound of spring birds and the smell of lilacs drifting. And from the gardens, everything felt soft that morning, like the town itself had taken a deep breath and smiled. In Ivy's studio, the windows were open, sunlight warming the wooden floor, and the scent of fresh paint mingled with cinnamon tea. Noah stood at the easel, camera in hand, filming the woman who turned his world into something beautiful and still. Ivy was painting again, not for a gallery, not for a deadline, just for herself and for him. "You know," she said, brushing a gentle line of gold across the canvas, You being here still feels like a dream I'm afraid to wake up from. Noah lowered the camera. You're the only part of my life that feels real, he said, stepping closer. Everything else before you feels like wandering. She looked at him. You're not wandering anymore. He smiled. I'm home. The following weeks unfolded like a living fairy tale. Not because everything was perfect, but because they chose each other through the imperfections. They moved slowly, not rushing toward what came next, but building it dot together. Noah started offering photography workshops to local teens, teaching them how to capture emotion through still images. He launched a small studio space beside Ivy's, where he displayed photos that paired with her paintings too. Mediums telling one love story. Ivy began a new series titled The Shape of Love, Portraits of People in Willow Bend, painted through the lens of their emotions. The collection bloomed into a celebration of connection, vulnerability, and healing. At the center of it all was them. They shared quiet mornings and loud laughter, rainy nights curled up with books, spontaneous road trips to nearby towns, and lazy Sunday afternoons doing nothing but holding each other like time didn't matter, because it didn't, not when they had each other. One evening, during the town's summer lantern festival, Noah took Ivy's hand and led her to the same lake where they had watched wishes rise into the sky many months ago. Only this time, he brought his own lantern, and inside it, he had placed a tiny piece of paper. Ivy opened it, written in his unmistakable handwriting. Were the words, "Forever is wherever you are." Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee, heart in his throat, and rang in his palm. Ivy, he said, voice shaking with emotion, you're my beginning and my peace. You're the art I never knew I needed to find. Will you marry me? Tears shimmered in her eyes. Not from fear, from certainty, from joy, from home. She nodded, voice choked with feeling. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times over. Their wedding was held beneath the old willow tree behind Ivy's childhood home, the same one she'd slept under as a lost little girl. Only this time she wasn't lost. She was found. By love. By Noah. Ceremony was simple. Wildflowers, candlelight, music played by the kids Noah had mentored. Ivy wore a dress she designed herself, soft, flowing, with threads of gold woven into the fabric. When she walked down the aisle, Noah's eyes filled with tears, not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because he knew he was looking at forever. And this time, it wasn't just a word. It was a choice, a vow, a life. Years later, they would still sit on that rooftop, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars dance. And every time, Noah would whisper, "Thank you for painting my forever." And Ivy would reply, "Thank you for staying long enough to become it."